Movers and shakers. Who is playing their way into contention and who is maybe at the other end of that scale following the game against the Western Force? Welcome back to the channel. I did a video like this after the Argentina game and I thought I'd do another one now following Western Force, and I'll continue to do it throughout the tour games in the build-up to that test series against the Wallabies. So welcome back to the channel. You have your say in the comments section. Whose performances impressed you? And whose were you maybe looking at and thinking, oh, I don't think you're doing yourself any favours there? You can let me know in the comments and like the video as well. And if you're enjoying all the content from out in Australia, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button. I did another walk and talk video yesterday, which is something new that I've done for this tour. So I hope you're enjoying those. They're a little bit different, but it gets me out and about and gets you guys out on the tour a little bit more. So let me know kind of all that sort of stuff if you're enjoying the content or not. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run through the 23 for the Western Force game and just talk through those options, just like I did for the Argentina game. A little bit of housekeeping before we get going, I suppose, is to acknowledge that it is still early here. And actually, I think we'll start having a better indication of exactly where players sit in the pecking order after this week's game, because after Wednesday, Jamison Gibson-Park at scrum half, Hugo Keenan at fullback, and then James Ryan, who's on the bench, will all have at least got some game time. We wouldn't have seen Blair Kinghorn, obviously, because he's coming from France. Ben White has only just been called up because of injury cover for Thomas Williams. But after Wednesday, we would have seen everyone at least once and most of the players multiple times. So I think that's when we start having a better indication of what Andy Farrell is thinking, and we've seen enough evidence from players to be able to judge them fairly against one another, I think. So there is still time, it is still early. The flip side of that is, someone was saying yesterday, we'll be back here in Brisbane building up to the first test in like 2 weeks, two and a bit weeks, something like that, which is ridiculous. So it will absolutely fly by. We'll be here again before we know it. So players have to capitalise on their chances whilst they can. So let's start with it. So this was the team that took on the Western Force. I'll just walk through. Let's start in the front row. Schoeman, Sheehan, Furlong. Mixed bag there. Schoeman I don't think has done anything wrong on the tour, but hasn't necessarily done anything to say that he should absolutely be involved and starting at loosehead or involved at loosehead, purely because Ellis Genge was so good against Argentina, and obviously Andrew Porter, for a lot of us, I think we would still have starting the tests because of the backlog of evidence we've had over the last few years. Haven't seen loads of Porter on this tour, but I think people would still have Porter there. So Schoeman's done okay, but he's probably a player that is kind of in the middle where they haven't necessarily gone up or down, but they're still kind of where they are. Sheehan, captain the team, scored a try. The fact that he was captain tells us everything, I think, about how Andy Farrell views him. I would be very surprised if he doesn't start the test series. Realistically, I think at this stage it's only about whether he gets injured or not. I think he is the best hooker on tour. He will start the test series, and he did a good job against the Western Force. Tadhg Furlong, on the other hand, in fact, the front row generally is a complete varying scale. I think you got Sheehan up here. Porter is still kind of in the middle. Has Tadhg Furlong dropped just a little bit? Now, I get it with Furlong. This is his third Lions tour. He has started test matches on all of his other tours. He is so good when at his best. But are we seeing a player that struggled for fitness at the end of the season and missed a lot of rugby and is trying to catch up here? Didn't necessarily look at his best against the Western Force. I thought the scrum got a lot better when the replacements came on. And I think because Will Stewart has had such a good year, right now I would actually have Will Stewart starting the test series ahead of Tadhg Furlong. It doesn't mean that Furlong won't get back in there, and if you can get him just a bit fresher, a few more minutes in his legs, get him up to speed, he's such a good player that he could well end up starting. But I'm just wondering whether he's dipped in my mind a little bit anyway. Into the second row, this is a real contrast. Joe McCarthy, official player of the match, at his best almost, wasn't he? I feel he can be quite an inconsistent performer. I think sometimes his discipline can let him down and he gives away stupid penalties. But when he's at his best, he is a big, imposing lock that will score tries, which will get you over the gain line, which will do so much good work. A bit like what we saw him do for Ireland in Marseille at the start of the Six Nations a couple of years ago. And I thought this game against the Western Force, he was back to that level of play. And given that I think, those of you that have watched the other videos would have seen me say this, that Andy Farrell is going to partner Maro Itoje with one of the bigger second rows, either a Cummings, a McCarthy or a Ryan, he's put himself right in the mix. The flip side is Scott Cummings, bless him, who was shaking his head when he was being replaced, no doubt really disappointed with his evening's work. The restarts were a problem. It's not just his fault. That is a kind of unit as a pod to be able to make that work, but restarts were a problem for the Lions. I always viewed Cummings as the extra lock anyway. They took more second rows than I was expecting, and he was the guy that got into the original squad kind of because they're taking more lock options, and unfortunately I don't think his stock necessarily rose off the back of the game against the Western Force. Back row, Tyg Burn, Josh van der Fleer, Henry Pollock. Tyg Burn, I think, has done a good job. We've seen him in the second row. We've seen him at 6. I don't think we've necessarily seen him at his absolute best, but we know what he can do. He's been fine. I think it's him and Chesham playing for possibly the 6 jersey. I wonder whether we see one of them at 6 and one of them on the bench, because they both can play in the second row. They can both cover back row. They're good line-out options, which has been an issue for the Lions. So, yeah, I think Burn's fine. I don't think he's necessarily been exceptional, but I think he's in contention. Josh van der Fleer. So Josh van der Fleer, compared with, say, Tom Curry or Jack Morgan or Ben Earl or Henry Pollock, a lot of those other back row options, isn't as flashy a player almost, but geez, he gets through some work, doesn't he? Like, makes absolutely loads of tackles and basically doesn't miss any, hits breakdowns, does so much of the dirty work. So even though he probably hasn't necessarily had the highlights Henry Pollock has, and hasn't necessarily had some of the carries Ben Earl had against Argentina, or even some of the turnovers that Tom Curry and Jack Morgan had, I think he's right in contention because A, Andy Farrell knows him so well, but also he just does a lot of unseen work that probably goes underappreciated. Excellent player, 7 so competitive, but he's 100% in the mix. And then Henry Pollock. Again, we probably saw the good and the bad of Henry Pollock. And the bad isn't really even that bad. It's just a 20-year-old guy that is still learning the craft in a way. He does some things that other players can't do. Like, he makes things happen. He's always looking to impact the game. But then we also saw the pass over the head of James Lowe, I think it was, wasn't it, when they were running back to collect the kick. And it's that sort of thing that could count against him when it comes to a test series. But I think him and Earl are playing for a bench spot. I still think Conan will probably start at 8. I think the 8 options aren't amazing, but I think Earl and Pollock are probably in competition for a bench spot because of covering multiple positions, plus the energy and dynamism they can bring off the bench. Having said that, Conan was excellent off the bench for Ireland in the Six Nations, so who knows what Andy Farrell is thinking. But Pollock's done a good job so far, but not at the top level of some of these guys. Thomas Williams, I mentioned it in the video yesterday, brutal for him to miss out. Geez, you feel for him. I think he would have been possibly starting the tests or certainly involved in the test team, but he's gone. Finn Russell at 10 did a good job. The Lions' attack looked a lot better against the Western Force, and the fact that he is partnering Gibson Park, he's the only player to have to back it up short turnaround Saturday to Wednesday, I think tells us a lot about what Andy Farrell is thinking for his halfback partnership. And I think on paper right now it would be Gibson Park and Russell I think is the best 10 in the squad. Centres, Tuipulotu and Ringrose. Tuipulotu for me is one of those players that hasn't necessarily done anything wrong, but I wonder whether he's been a bit quieter than he would hope for. Ringrose, on the other hand, I thought was excellent. I thought he was absolutely outstanding against the Western Force. And because a lot of those centre options, Aki, Ringrose, Tuipulotu, Jones, are all quite of a similar level. It's not like previous Lions teams where you have Brian O'Driscoll in his pomp or Jonathan Davies or someone that you think, yeah, if you're fit, you're starting. Centres are really up for grabs. I think Ringrose's performance was very, very good, and I think he's one of the big movers from this week. Excellent performance at 13. Into the back 3, who all had a good game actually. James Lowe, Matt Hansen, Elliot Daly. That could end up being the back 3 that starts the test matches. Tommy Freeman will have something to say about that. James Lowe I thought was good. Matt Hansen, if you didn't see it, Andy Farrell in his press conference offered up the suggestion that whilst Joe McCarthy was the official player of the match, he said the best player on the pitch by an absolute mile was Matt Hansen, which tells us everything we need to know. He was excellent, not just with ball in hand, but I think what Farrell loved was a lot of his work off the ball, running back, collecting kicks, doing kind of the unseen or less glamorous work on the wing, but he did it really, really well. And Elliot Daly at 15, man, he could be involved in his 3rd test series for the Lions, which is an incredible achievement. We've seen him on the wing in 17, outside centre 2021, when he got absolutely smoked by Lukanyuam. And he could start 15 in this series. Haven't seen Hugo Keenan as I'm recording this. He'll play tomorrow. Haven't seen Blair Kinghorn. And Daly's playing his way into contention, particularly because he covers multiple positions, so it would be a great bench option. All right, that's the starting 15. Let me run through the replacements. Kelleher, Porter, Stewart. I still have Sheehan as my starting hooker. Luke Cowan-Dickie and Kelleher for me, competing for the replacement. Still think Jamie George should have been in the squad. I think he's a better set-piece hooker than both of those guys, and the line-out hasn't been great. I think Jamie George would fit right into this tour, but there we go. Andrew Porter, I still have him starting the tests. We haven't seen loads of him yet. We'll see how he goes on the week on Wednesday. I have to get used to the midweek games, about to say on the weekend. Will Stewart, as I mentioned already, for me right now, he's probably just ahead of Tyg Furlong. That could change. Furlong could come back into it, but I think Will Stewart had a really good impact against the Western Force off the back of a great season. Chesham, I've mentioned, I thought he was good off the bench, him and Tyg Byrne. What great options, by the way. Chesham and Tyg Byrne as your kind of lock or 6 option. Excellent. Conan, I have as my 8. I'm not enamoured with the number 8 options, but we'll see him on Wednesday as well. Mitchell hasn't been bad, but actually if it wasn't for the injury for Thomas Williams, I probably wouldn't have him involved in the test series at the moment. But I think now he is, because Williams has been injured. Ben White hasn't played yet. Gibson Park is just coming back. You still probably have Gibson Park starting, but Mitchell would be involved in the tests. Hugh Jones, kind of quiet game, didn't see too much of him, and Marcus Smith is similar. Wasn't great against Argentina, and you feel he's maybe dropping down the pecking order a bit. I think it was always going to be tough for Marcus Smith, because I think he was always kind of the third 10 behind the Finns, Russell and Smith. And then was Marcus Smith ever going to be playing in a test match at fullback? I mean, he has done for England, but I always struggle to see that on this tour, and I could be totally wrong and we'll end up seeing him start against the Wallabies, but I'll be surprised. So that's how I see it. How do you see it? Give me your comments. Who are the movers and shakers? Who's playing their way in? Who is dropping out of contention for the test series? So my big winners, McCarthy, Ringrose, Hansen, that Irish trio I think were the big winners from the Western Force game. The players that have dropped the most, Scott Cummings, maybe Tyg Furlong. Am I being harsh there? Let me know. Drop a comment down below. Like the video as well. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing from out in Australia. And I'll see you in the next one.